So as you heard then, South Africa's current drought and water scarcity crisis has officially been declared a national state of disaster by the incoming Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs Minister Zweli Mkhize. It follows recommendations by the inter-ministerial task team on drought and water. The minister has declared the disaster in terms of the Disaster Management Act. Well, joining us to discuss the general state of our water and the extent of the crisis is a former Director General in what is now called Water and Sanitation Department. He's also from the Wits School of Governance, Professor Mike Muller. Professor, good evening to you and thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Evening to you and your viewers.
Now, the new minister, Gugile Quinty, really inherits a department, I suppose you could say, in a state of shambles, does he not?
Well, he's got a lot of problems to address, and he started with one today, with this declaration of drought, which may not actually help him that much.
In what way does that become an impediment? Because one would have thought that this declaration is an indication of the extent of the crisis.
Well, you see, the drought is not particularly severe right across the country. I mean, we know that in the Western and Southern Cape there are problems. Much of the rest of the country doesn't have so much drought problems as management problems in municipalities and in his own department. The danger is that the declaration of drought is now going to distract him from the things he needs to do to fix his department and to fix the municipalities that are in some really dire straits in some cases.
So when a declaration such as this one has been made, practically, what does it mean for him and what does it mean for those areas?
Well, it's made for the whole country, and what it means for him is that instead of being able to sit inside his department and more or less organize things around, which are under his control, he's going to be sitting in an inter-ministerial committee with a bunch of ministers, people from agriculture, people from Cooperative, the local government people, and others, and all of them are going to have their own ideas about what should be done. It's going to make it a bit more difficult for him to actually set an agenda for fixing what is actually, and I'm only quoting Themba Godi here, a broken department, or the Auditor General, who says very similar things about a disastrous department. So, he has to focus on fixing his own organization, but immediately he's going to be taken out and plonked into a committee and now have to work with a whole lot of other ministers. I think that's going to be a distraction for him.
We'll talk in a moment about the state of the department itself, but if we look across the country in terms of some of the worst affected areas, we've mentioned the Western Cape, but let's talk about the Eastern Cape, for example. I mean, the Algoa system, for example, in Nelson Mandela Bay is at its lowest levels since 2011. We know Gauteng is not out of the woods. How much are we seeing problems in areas that perhaps don't get as much focus in the discussion, like the Northern Cape, for example?
Well, let's talk about Algoa, because that's a very easy example. Algoa is not short of water. Their dams are empty, but they've got a huge tunnel that brings water from the Orange River. They have taken 15 years to build a pipeline, about 50 kilometers, and a treatment works to be able to use that water, but they've neglected to build the pipeline from one side of the city to the other. So one half of the city depends on those very empty dams, and although they've got enough water, they can't get it to that part of the city. It's appalling planning, it's appalling delays in building things, and this is an example where it's not a drought problem, it's an absolute management disaster problem. And we have places like Beaufort West where we know that there have been absolute crises, but when you scratched at them, you discover that large part of the crisis was half the boreholes weren't working and the pumps hadn't been fixed. Now, if you don't fix the pumps, it doesn't matter whether you have a drought or not, you won't get the water. So those are the kind of issues that need to be addressed. And that's not taking away from those parts of the country where there is a drought that's gone on for a couple of years. But most parts of the country last year had actually pretty good rains. So there's no real reason for them to be in a drought crisis now. Gauteng and the Vaal system is somewhere around 83%, if I remember rightly, when I last looked at it. We're doing okay. And we are going to find, if we have another dry summer, and it's looking this year like it's going to be dry, it's been the rain's been quite poor so far, we might go into winter sort of where Cape Town was 2 years ago, the first year of a drought, and we're going to have to start managing it because we've been so late in building the Lesotho Highlands Water Project Phase 2, which would really rescue us from a bad drought. At the moment, Gauteng, the valve system, is very vulnerable if we move into a drought. It will make Cape Town look like a picnic.
I mean, I suppose the point to make there, Prof, as well, as far as Gauteng is concerned at least, is that we're not saving enough water. We haven't reduced consumption. We're failing at times to deal with basic things such as leaks, for example.
You know, I was looking back at when the President announced in the State of the Nation address in 2010 we were going to halve the leaks by 2014. Well, you know, it's a sad statement to make, but the Department of Water and Sanitation has just stopped reporting on what progress has been made. They've spent tens of millions, if not over 100 million, on training youngsters to fix leaks. They've got no idea how they're going to get those people to work inside the municipalities, because you can't solve problems by just sending people out in the street. They have to be part of an organized management structure, and I'm afraid that's not in place. But we don't know what the progress is because the department has stopped reporting on those things. It was getting too embarrassing for them. And this comes back to what Minister Mkhize is going to have to fix. He's going to have to get his department doing the things it should be doing, providing the technical support, providing the information so we know what's going on, and then the whole citizenry can pull together. And as we've seen in Cape Town, that can get us out of some very nasty situations which have been created by mismanagement, but then citizens cooperating can actually help to get us out of the mess.
All right, Professor Mike Muller there. It really does speak to a crisis in leadership. I mean, it surely hasn't helped that there have been, 13 heads of departments and 5 ministers in the last 11 years. But we'll keep a close eye on that story. Professor Mike Muller there, environmental scientist on a Skype line in Johannesburg.